Hi, writer. Want my support to get your book finished and out into the world? Join my Inner Circle membership, a community of supportive writers where each month we set goals, share pages, learn new techniques, and get you unstuck fast so that you can make continuous progress on your writing goals. Coached Writers Finish. And you can get me as your virtual book coach in this group program for only $199 a month, much less than a single one-on-one coaching session. Check out the details at susievidori.com/inner circle. We have live events happening all the time, so grab your spot now to join us. Welcome to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Susie Vidori, where I peel back the layers of how to wow your readers with your fiction, your nonfiction. Anybody can bang out a first draft, but it takes a little more work to make your book as amazing as it can be. Join me as I share the step-by-step writing techniques you could apply to your writing right away, as I host successful writers who share a behind-the-scenes look at their own writing lives, and as I live coach writers on their pages, giving practical writing examples that will make your own writing stronger. Nobody is born knowing how to write an engaging book. There are real and important skills that you need to learn. On this show, I cut through the noise and get you all the info you need. I can't wait to see how this information is going to transform your writing. Today, we have a special treat on the podcast. Well, special because it's one of my favorite things to do, and that is to sit down and talk with authors who I've had the privilege to work with from a very early start in their processes. Shivani Malik, that I'm speaking with today, she has her book is finally coming to light. And when I get to celebrate with these clients, with these writers, it is such a joy because I know that Shivani has written exactly the book that she set out to write. And that was our goal all along. It's super exciting to sort of see it all come together and to celebrate with you all. I want you to hear her story because it's not necessarily a typical journey, but she was really true to herself and knew what she wanted out of this book writing process and what she wanted at the end. She had learned some skills along the way, which is the way that often we've got to get the skills to do what it is that we want to do. She was born and raised in India, and then she immigrated to the US to pursue her PhD. And she completed her training at Stanford and also at the University of California, San Francisco. These days, she leads a group of researchers in an ecology-focused biotech in San Diego, where she resides with her husband and her dog. The Sky is Different Here is her debut novel, and it is coming out with She Writes Press imminently. We are so excited to talk about this. Today, we're going to talk about the fact that she wrote a novel based on her own lived experience, but it is a novel because she changed absolutely everything about it, other than the fact that her protagonist is a woman who also moved from India to the United States to become a scientist. I can't wait for you to hear this one. We talk all about the craft of writing and what it was like to make this happen. Please celebrate with me as you listen to Shivani. So welcome, Shivani. I am so excited to have you on this podcast today. We've been working together a long time. It's been so long coming, so let's celebrate.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to talk to you. You are my first book coach, and it's like coming up full circle, right? Working with you for almost a year and a half. We continue to stay in touch, and now the book is coming out, and I'm very excited to celebrate it with you.
Oh, it's awesome. So you've got your novel, which is The Sky is Different Here, coming out in February. And so we're kind of in that pre-sale piece of it. And we're hoping that we'll get the buzz and the word out, which is awesome. But how did writing a novel come about in the first place? So what made you want to write this book?
Yeah, so I started writing more as a way to make sense of losing my mother when I was in grad school. She was in India. I was in Southern Illinois working on my PhD when she died suddenly of a heart attack. And it took me a few years to come up with a strategy that worked for me. I am an introvert. I am a trained scientist. And it's hard for a scientist mind to process through emotions of that intensity. I was very close to her. And writing was a way of processing those emotions for me. And I wrote for several years before It was my husband who prompted me to put it in a book form, in a fictionalized novel form, because, at least according to him, somebody else could benefit from the story because it's a universal story. We all grieve something, we all are looking to belong somewhere. And the book somehow became that. It was not just a way of coping with losing somebody I loved a lot, but also making sense of my life in a world which was very different from which I grew up in. And that prompted me to fictionalize my story and write it in a novel form.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to people. Sometimes we think we're just writing a book, but writing is always personal. And I love that, even after working together for so long, I just learned something by asking you that question, right? I mean, I knew some of it, but your husband's involvement and like there's just always something behind it because writing a book is such a huge endeavor. It's not for the faint of heart, right? Okay, but you were no stranger to writing. So you were kind of journaling about this and then you decided to turn it into a very accomplished academic career. And so what kinds of writing did you do before writing a novel?
It was all academic writing, as you said. It's all hardcore scientific writing, starting from basic biochemistry papers to cancer biology and signaling pathways and reviews on how we think of precision medicine. So it was all about very specialized scientific topics.
Yeah.
And it couldn't be further away from novel writing. Not creative.
It couldn't, yeah, but at the same time, you bring those skills because one of the things, I mean, your writing was so strong right from the beginning. Everything in your writing was so clean and so strong. And you just had to learn that novel format. And I like to point that out when we're on the podcast because a lot of our listeners come from different walks of life and from different backgrounds. And even though it's not the same, you're saying, oh, it couldn't be further from novel writing, but you brought that strong writing skill as well. So don't discount that, right? Because it helps a lot. Okay, so you sat down and you're like, all right, I'll try out this novel thing. How did the writing go?
As long as it was journaling and thinking and reflecting, that was great. But, and I had written like, I don't know, 100,000 words when I came to you. I do read quite a bit. I could see that there were some good things in there, but it was not a novel. Needed pace, it needs setting, it needed something that would make the story interesting. So, as I said, one of the ways we think about scientific writing is we are trying to deliver facts. But novel writing is not that. There is a story, there is a core, but it needs to be told in a way that interests people. And, as you just pointed out, it's also coming a little bit into scientific writing. You want readers to be interested in your story. And that's where I was feeling like it was not coming through. And that is when I jumped, wanted your help to figure out what was the problem.
And working with you was so fun because not surprisingly, you were an amazing student, right? You've been a student for many, many years. And a teacher and all the above. So you were an amazing student and we were able to break it down in a way that made sense. Because like you said, even in scientific writing, you're trying to write a persuasive paper in many times to convince somebody of your hypothesis is true or to convince somebody, I'm going to get this all wrong. I wish you guys could see Shivani's face right now. She's like, I know that you're talking science right now, Susie. But yeah, you're bringing those skills. And so we were able to frame it in that way. And I think the biggest thing that we worked on was taking those sort of journal entries because oftentimes we were like, wow, I did it. It's 100,000 words, but you knew that it wasn't a novel yet. Many writers don't recognize that. They think, it's done. This is what I think. Let's put it out into the world. But yeah, you were missing scenes. And so what we worked on was putting that into scenes and putting all of those experiences that your fictionalized character, Shani, and I mean, you didn't go too far from Shivani to Shani, but you did, right? And she has a very different life from yours. What made you decide to do a novel versus a memoir, which is also very popular today? Many people would choose to write your own story, but you chose to fictionalize it. What are the reasons behind that for you?
That's a very good question. And there are multiple reasons. Number one was it gave me creative space, especially in terms of pacing the story. as you just said, I went to school for a very long time. If I were to even pick one stage of my academic training, it would be very boring. My PhD was 6 years long. My postdoc was 6 years long. So it helped with pacing because by fictionalizing, I could shrink the timeline a little bit. It could it would be made more interesting. Again, it gave me more creativity to bring a little more stakes to the scenes, which would be not very hard hitting or dramatic if it was, my real experience. That was a big part of it. The second part was, I do work in the same space, and I did not want it to become a problem by saying that it was.
Yeah, and there's privacy, and there's not, like there's NDAs, I'm sure that you've signed it. So you really didn't have the freedom to write about that time the way that most people can. So I completely understand that. But you're right. The funny thing is, when you're writing memoir and about your own experience, you can still take a few liberties, but they mostly need to be true. But here you took a really big step away where Shani is a completely different person from you. Yes, she is still a woman who moved from India to the United States and became a scientist. Mm-hmm. And some of those things definitely, whenever we draw, I mean, even writing fiction, we're drawing on our own experience. That's the only thing that we can really do. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything that your fictional characters do when you call in and say, but Susie, I didn't do these things. Don't think I did. But it's still, everything that you write is necessarily done through your own lens, which is, okay, I did this, or I didn't do this, but I thought about it, or I did the opposite of this, or I wish I'd done that, right? Like there's this lens that we color everything with that is always there in fiction. So here it was just that some of those things were much closer to your own experience. Does that resonate with you? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, and I think I love that you said that it gave you some creative space, right? And as you were saying, you were processing some very deep emotions, and some of that does make its way. Well, a lot of that makes its way into the book when Shani, has this experience. She also loses her mother in the book and tries to process that, and a lot of that was things that you actually went through. So thank you for sharing that. But I think it gave you that distance to be able to write it for somebody else. Yeah. Okay. So when you made that choice, did the project get easier? Like, did you ever consider writing it as a memoir? I mean, you were journaling, but or was that always like, okay, if I'm going to write a book, it's going to be fiction?
I think I had made that choice very early on, mostly because, as you just said, it gave me a bit of a distance. And I think I didn't realize it then, but subconsciously, that did give me that distance. And I didn't have to. And again, the scientist brain always kicks in. If I am writing a memoir, I would be like, oh, this is not factually correct. And making that choice early on that this is fiction gave me that distance, even from my analytical brain, that it doesn't have to be.
You would have given us the I woke up and then I went to bed and all of the 6 years of your PhD. I know you would have done that, right? But like, well, it needs to all be in there. I could see it. And maybe one day, that'll be really important when you're rich and famous and people will want that story. But right now, I think it was a good choice not to write that 6 years of your PhD. All right. So we took that original draft that you had. We really deepened your immersiveness and created those scenes. What are the biggest things that you learned when you were creating that sort of next draft and we were working together? What were the biggest things that sort of resonate with you now that you would bring to writing your next novel?
We'll be right back.
Hey, writer, ready to take your fiction to the next level? Whether you've just got a great idea or you're already stuck in the murky middle of writing your book, the Wicked Good Fiction Bootcamp I designed just for you. This 8-week self-paced online course gives you the tools, the guidance, and the support you need to get to the end of your book and know that it is wicked good. Head to susievidoria.com/bootcamp or follow the link in the show notes for more information and get started today. I'll see you inside where I'll be there to support you as you comment and share your work throughout the course.
I think the first thing you asked me was, what's the why? And although, you do have some sense of it when you were writing a novel, and I had already written the novel before I worked with you, that why became even more clear. So I think that was the first big step. What that did was it helped me hone into what the theme was. And once that became clear, the character arc became clear. And that started to shine through a lot of fluff that was around it in my first draft. So I think that was a key difference after I started working with you and the draft became cleaner. And when that happens, then you can still see the story for what it really is, like cutting the shrubbery around and making the central piece even more clear and compelling, I guess. So I think that was number one. And number second was from a very early on, making things a little more finalized, right? Not just say, oh, I'll come back to it and we'll see it. When I started working with you, it was like, let's finalize these 20 pages and then we'll go on to the next one. So that brings a little bit of more discipline to writing and makes it easier to edit when you have done the first draft. And what I learned from you was editing is the biggest part of it.
It is, and as you're getting the first draft done, it's like, we're done, I typed the end, and then there's so much more to go usually. I love that because really, you're absolutely right. I always start with why. And I think that now it seems so obvious when I ask you that, I wanted to share. You said it right off the bat. It is the first thing that you answered when I asked you, how did this all come about? You're able to articulate, well, I was processing grief. I thought that probably people might benefit from that as well in this format. And it was a way to do that. And it seems so obvious once you state it. But if we don't address that and we don't create the book with that in mind, which you didn't, right? The first draft kind of had that in it, but it wasn't the theme. It wasn't what you wanted readers to take away. I always flip things, as you know, to the reader's perspective. So instead of thinking about theme, which is like what the writer wants to say, it's like, well, what do you want your readers to get out of this? And think about it that way. What do you want them to take away? And so, I just love that you're able to articulate that like second nature now, right? And so, it's just amazing how that sharpens, like you said, it sharpens everything. And then the second piece to that is that whole idea. I mean, I'm so obsessed with show no tell, as you know. That's why the podcast is all about show no tell. So we're going to have a quick lesson here because Shivani brought it up. And that is making those decisions and kind of putting your feet in the sand or like drawing a line in the sand and saying, okay, we're working on this 20 pages and I need to decide. I can't just leave everything until later to decide, because what happens then is we haven't made those decisions, then everything is vague, right? And so a lot of times I'll stop you and be like, hey, let's choose something. If you don't love it later on, that's fine, then change it. But at least you can make something specific and you won't have these like whole passages that are super vague because you haven't made a decision about what Shahi does in that situation. Exactly. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. In fact, that was probably the most fun part for me. I hope it was for you, was bringing, forcing you to make some of those decisions and pull some things that actually were from your own experience that only you could bring to that story. And one of the ones that comes to mind for me, I've used this example a lot. I don't use your name, I don't use the example, but I can here because you're here. But when we were trying to figure out how to show the passage of time, because your novel actually follows a very long timeline. What's the timeline from start to finish? Remind me.
I think it's like 5 to 6 years, I guess.
5 to 6 years, which is hard to do as a newer writer. It's like, how do we pass the time? And do you remember what we used? One of the things?
The seasons?
The seasons, yes. And the bottles of ghee.
Oh, yes. The 4.
Are they? I hope they still are in there. Yeah. So Shivani relayed this tale when she was leaving India that, she only had a certain amount of luggage space, and her dad rocked up with these 4 bottles of ghee, which is clarified butter that's used in a lot of Indian cooking, that he insisted that she bring with her to America. And it took her a long time to get through those bottles. And so it was a fun way to both, it showed so many things, right? On so many levels. It was like, it was also something that really happened, but it was this metaphor for how he was trying to help and also didn't really have a concept that you had to give something else up if you were going to bring those things. And probably you could make your own or buy it in America, right? And also it was a neat little vehicle that you were able to plug in to show how much time had passed, because then you were down to your last bottle of ghee and that last bit of connection to that gift that your father had given. And so it was this really neat thing that you were able to insert like a couple of sentences through the book that just tied all that timeline together and made it feel way more interesting than. And then a year passed, right? Which is what we tend to put, and nobody wants to read that. And then a year passed. Well, what happened in that year? I don't know. But oh my gosh, Shawnee's only got 3 bottles of ghee left. So I guess that much time has passed, right? It was really cool.
I agree, and I think that and a lot of other ways that or techniques you showed me, which would show the different things and telling, because I think that it makes, of course, for more interesting writing, but that is one of the way that quickens up the pace rather than dragging it and making it boring. And I think it's hard to know that as a first-time writer, that these are the techniques that make a difference, because all you know is, yes, the pace is slow, but how do you fix it? That's the question. And that's exactly how you showed me to do, because it's easier to say, oh, your pace is slow, fix it. But the main question is, how do you fix it? And it is by bringing these details and bringing this imagery and more interesting references that ties in the story and also makes it.
And also really, and I think I said this already, but tells the part of the story that makes it unique, right? Like,
Yeah.
that only you could bring to the table, because I would never think of that I would tote, these bottles of ghee around across the world, really. So there's these neat little stories that really show pieces of your culture that only you can bring, that make your story unique, that make it not just any coming to America story, but actually yours. Okay, so how are you feeling now that it's coming out? Are you excited for people in your life to read this book? I mean, you're excited for strangers to read it. I know that. How are you feeling building up to this? Because it's a lot of times when we're writing memoir or fictionalized, that's really close to us. How do you feel about people in your life, the scientists that you work with, your family in India and in the United States? What do you think's going to happen? Like, are you excited for them to read it?
I am. I'm excited. There are lots of feeling. I'm excited. I'm a little embarrassed. I'm not sure what they'll think of it, especially my team of scientists who are all diverse women from different parts of the world, including US. And they all know that the book is coming out. So I'm a little bit curious as to what they think. Many of them have their own unique journeys, and some of it is shared with my own experience. So definitely that. I think a lot of my family members knew I was writing. They've seen some early drafts. So we'll see if they get to read it.
Yeah, I want to unpack this for a minute, because you're saying I'm a little embarrassed. And I don't know if that's really the right word. You have a huge smile on your face right now. Let's unpack that for a moment, because you've done something that not many people do, which is finished and published an amazing novel. So I know it's very different from your day job, and that's probably part of it, right? And also it's sharing your writing can be very exposing, right? In a way that probably you haven't had to do or had the opportunity to do. Yeah, I just can't wait to see what doors this is going to open for you. What do you hope that readers will take away? So what do you hope that people will learn about you? So we don't want you to be embarrassed. What's the opposite of that? What do you hope for that they will see?
I think I really hope in some way that it breaks the stereotype. I think a lot of Indian people abroad, when asked what they do, the automatic response is, oh, you're a scientist. If I say a scientist, oh, like, oh, I was going to say a doctor, but scientist is close enough. But, breaking the stereotype that it's not just about what you do or being highly educated or highly skilled, but there are other aspects of life that make you the person you are. And each of us have our own unique stories. And I really, really hope that is what people take away, that each of our stories are unique. And yes, we are all united by, some universal feelings and emotions, but we do have our own personal stories that
Yeah.
that are interesting, interesting in their own way.
Yeah. It's an amazing story. I can't wait for people to read it. And we were just talking before we started recording, so I'm going to bring this up because people often ask me, especially, you mentioned that you're introverted, that this is kind of more difficult to express sometimes. And said, well, we were talking about promotions and how are you going to get this word out into the world? I encouraged you to find something that spoke to you. And you were telling me before we started recording about, and I'm like, wait, let's do it on the podcast about your essay writing. So tell me a little bit about what you are doing to sort of complement this and to get the word out about the book with your essay writing. What's going on there?
Yes, so I did meet an amazing local author who had a very similar journey to mine. She's came from India. She's a scientist and now quite an accomplished writer. And with her, I came up with a few topics to write a couple of essays to bring visibility to themes that are part of the book. Themes about grieving, themes about immigration, themes about pursuing science. And it helped me reflect a little bit more on some of the things I talk about in a fictionalized way. These are, of course, all nonfiction essays. So a little bit more of my own experience. And it's a way of reflection and it's a way of improving your things and bringing a lot of techniques I learned from you. And it's because I'm not that big on social media. I think this is a way for me to bring visibility to the work by shining a light
Absolutely.
on the themes in the book.
Yeah, and you really don't need to be all the things all the time. And I say this, I mean, I feel like a broken record when I say this to writers, but I love that you've embraced that. You found something that's comfortable. You found something that's meaningful to you, and where those essays float out into the world, I think is going to create speaking opportunities and create opportunities for you to share that story with the book as, support for that. No, so congratulations. I can't wait to see, you'll have to let us know when all those are out and we'll promote them for you through our social channels. So you won't have to be out there. Okay, so here is the portion of the podcast. I know you're an avid listener, so you know what this is, the quick fire portion. So here we go. How long did it take you to write this book from the first time you had the idea to it being published in February 2026?
5 years.
5 years. Yeah, that's amazing. 5 years. Okay. What was your first big break along this journey where you were like, all right, this is really going to happen? This is coming out. I'm not giving up. This is really going to happen.
It'll sound cliched because I am talking to you, but it was after working with you because it was not just the writing techniques you showed me. It was your energy really that helped me believe in myself that, okay, I can do this. So
I love your story. Yeah. Oh, I don't ask that question to like fish, but sometimes it comes up that way because yes, and it's also investing emotionally and financially and time-wise and all those things that coaching happens is like, all right, now I'm really in. And it's neat to work with somebody who can show you all the things. Like when you come up against a block, I've seen it, right? Like I've done it with hundreds of authors and I can be like, here are the ways past it. Which one works for you? Here are the ways past it. Let's keep going, right? Okay, I love that. Thank you. Okay, what is your best advice for writers wanting to turn their life experience into a fictionalized novel? If somebody's out there listening and they're like, should I do it? Should I not do it? What's your best advice for them?
I think if it means something to you, absolutely sure. I think you should always write what resonates with yourself first, without thinking about whether readers read it, whether it will be good or not. That is beyond us. I think if it means something to the writer, you should absolutely write it. The only advice I will give is figure out a way to distance yourself a little bit because emotions are important, feelings are important, but when you're writing, really writing, you need to, separate yourself a little bit from it. And if you keep that in mind, then I think it's a very enriching experience.
Yeah, I think, and I'll just add to that when you are writing memoir, even if you're fictionalizing it, just make sure that you have the support in your life for those emotions that do come up, right? You're saying distance yourself a bit from it. But there are going to be times when it's hard, right? Or when you're holding up a mirror to the way that you interacted in the world and how people interacted with you, and it's going to bring stuff up, right? Like it's a hard process. So don't discount it when that happens. Just make sure that you have that support somewhere in your life, please.
Yeah.
All right. On that amazing note, Shivani, where can we find you and where can we pre-order the book? We'll put all the links in the show notes, but let us know where to go to help support this. It's time to pre-order the book. Go help Shivani get this book out with a bang. Go check out the cover. It is absolutely incredible. And I think I didn't even realize it was one of your favorite colors until I realized that it's behind you on the wall. This beautiful robin's egg blue that is the cover. So go check it out. Where can we find you, Shivani?
Everywhere, anywhere you can get books. Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Yeah.
Awesome. And where can we find your essays and where can we connect with you?
I have my own website now, which I will update once the essays are accepted. I am trying to submit it to a few places. I do write pretty frequently on Substack, which is also linked on my website.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I can't wait for all of our readers to read your amazing book. Thanks, Shivani.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Show Don't Tell Writing Podcast with me, Susie Vidori. It is my absolute honor to bring you the straight goods for that book you're writing or the book that you're planning to write. Please help me keep the podcast going by helping people find us. You can subscribe to the podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening to show how much you enjoy the show. That's how other listeners will find us. Also, visit susievidori.com/newsletter to hop on my weekly inspired writing newsletter list, where you'll stay inspired and be the first to know about all the upcoming training events and writing courses that happen in my community. Want my eyes on your writing? Submit a page of your current draft for a chance to come on the podcast at the link in the show notes. I'd love to chat with you about your writing in my always positive, incredibly supportive way, so that you can make great strides towards your writing goals. I'm here to cheer you on. Remember, that book you're writing is going to open doors that you haven't even thought of yet, and I can't wait to help you make that it the absolute best it can be. See you again right here next week.